Modernisation and structuralism were the two development theories that dominated the 1950s and 1960s. Yet there was also a response to the predominantly Eurocentric approach to development offered by modernisation, and that was Frank's dependency theory. André Gunder Frank was an American-German economic historian and sociologist who became an economic advisor in Chile. His critique of other development theories suggested that the poor global south were exploited by the rich global north, and that modernisation failed to consider the detrimental impact of earlier colonialisation. This critique became known as dependency theory. If you YouTube dependency theory, there is an excellent explanation of this, illustrated through a series of diagrams, essentially showing the world divided into 4 circles, each one representing the central core countries such as the USA, the peripheral core such as Canada, the core periphery such as South Africa, and the peripheral periphery such as Zambia. The circles are connected by arrows to represent the flow of resources, all of which ultimately end up serving the needs of the central core countries. This is known as international division of labour, and illustrates how richer countries exploit those that are less economically developed than themselves. Secondly, each circle is divided into an approximately 20-80 divide to show that all countries, no matter how rich they are, have a small elite who control the majority of the wealth, with a large, dependent, less wealthy. An up-to-date example of this is China, which now has the unfortunate accolade of being the most unequal society in the world, with 1% of its population controlling about 30% of the national wealth. This inequality, experienced by all countries, is known as class distinction, and within the global system, the economically and politically elite work to support each other's status. Finally, this model of 4 connected circles is enclosed within one larger circle, which represents the global economic system, in which today global capitalism dominates. This system only sees the economically and politically elite prosper through trade and finance, and systems and approaches to development are further consolidated by the workings of international organisations such as the World Bank and the IMF. In summary, therefore, whilst the global north can continue to develop in a progressive and linear pattern, this is at the expense of the global south, who have their rates of development restricted, which thus leads to the concept of underdevelopment. Frank himself stated that development and underdevelopment are 2 sides of the same coin, which was his way of saying that rich countries have become wealthy on the backs of the poor. Chang went one stage further in 2002 in his book Kicking Away the Ladder, in which he explored the hypothesis that rich countries were deliberately adopting strategies to prevent developing countries reach similar levels of development. The strengths of dependency theory as a critique of development theories are twofold. It highlights external barriers and directs the focus away from a Eurocentric, critical view of the rest, with its associated emphasis on the West sorting out solutions for them. Additionally, it encouraged other theories, such as the world systems theory, which was later adopted by some countries from the semi-periphery, such as South Korea, with its state policy to protect domestic car industries, such as Hyundai, from foreign competition. However, criticisms levelled at dependency theory include the fact that it is seen to be an overgeneralization about the long-term negative impact of colonialism, and the success of the Asian tigers has often been quoted in support of this. Secondly, dependency theory is no more than a critique and offers no practical solutions regarding what a country should actually do to develop. Finally, some development experts actually go as far as suggesting that the impacts of colonialism were good. For example, the right-wing historian Niall Ferguson has stated that the medical care that was adopted in French Senegal was a huge step forward from the widespread practice of black magic. Whilst dependency theories were considered during the 1960s and 70s, by the 1980s a new development theory was being adopted. This was Neo-Liberalism. Neo-Liberalism was a new approach to new behaviour and traditional values, and was a market-driven approach which saw a deliberate withdrawal of state intervention to be replaced by the rise of the role of private companies and international organisations. A neoliberalist policy was typified by the selling off of loss-making and inefficient public services, which is a major feature of World Bank and IMF, SAPs and PRSPs for debt relief-seeking countries today. Mrs. Thatcher's Conservative government ideologies were synonymous with neoliberal policies, and much of her time in power was inextricably linked with the privatisation of previously state-run industries such as coal, gas and the railways. A key term to use to summarise this policy is comparative advantage. The specialisation in production and exporting only goods and services that can be produced more efficiently than others. The role of comparative advantage was fundamental to the success of the Asian tiger countries as part of the Asian miracle of the 4-decade period between the 1960s and 1990s. Supporters of neoliberal development policies point to the outstanding sustained economic growth, often above 6% for many consecutive years, in countries such as Singapore, South Korea and Malaysia. This led to an increase in the standard of living within those countries. The World Bank, a big supporter of neoliberal policies, has claimed that this is a strong and credible model to follow because it opens up economies to foreign investment through trade, limits the role of the state in the national economy, and invests in human capital. Even today, a stereotypical image of a hard-working student would often be that of an Asian schoolchild, an image created by Southeast Asian countries' serious and committed investment in their education infrastructure. However, all good things must come to an end, and in 1997, the Asian tigers and the rest of the world were rocked by the Asian crisis, which involved the withdrawal of a lot of foreign investment and a subsequent economic crash. Critics of neoliberalism as a development theory would point to this as an illustration that it is not a fail-safe approach to development. Furthermore, critics would suggest that the Asian tigers did not adopt a coherent set of neoliberalist policies in Southeast Asia, but instead used a range of approaches to initiate development. And in fact, this economic growth was not created by free trade and an open economy, but rather by government intervention, such as in Hong Kong, where protectionism of the textile trade enabled growth in that particular industry. Finally, a weakness of neoliberalism is that in many countries which appear to have adopted this as a theory for development, there has been a rapid growth